Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to embark on a journey like no other. Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast,
your go-to destination for a unique blend of recovery and discovery.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Mark. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to create a safe and uplifting space for our guests and listeners to share their stories with sincerity and a touch of humor.
Remember, we are not a glum lot. The Glum Lot Podcast is more than just a source of entertainment. It's a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, recovery is possible. Every story we share carries the power to inspire positive change.
So buckle up, get ready to listen, and join us in discovering the strength that lies within every individual's journey. This is the Glum Lot Podcast, where humor meets hope.
Okay, Mr. Brett, we are on episode number 9, and I just want to remind the folks out there in the Glum Lot community that we do have an email, theglumlotpodcast@gmail.com, and we also have a Facebook group called the Glum Lot Podcast, which you are welcome to join, and we'll have all the latest episodes popping up on there, and you can leave comments or whatever you like.
Yeah, definitely feel free if it's something that you would think would be beneficial for us to do. We'd love to take ideas because without anything like that, we don't grow. So
right.
Feel
Plus,
free.
We're going to be embarking on a new way of doing things for people that don't live in our area and can't get here to the studio, and that would be doing the podcast and recording it remotely. So we're going to be experimenting with that. I'm sure we'll be able to get it down, and then we can start having guests from all over the world.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff right there.
Yes, it is. So, but what's on your mind today?
Well, I think I'm a miracle.
Yeah, I think you are too.
Isn't it something?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because I stuck around. Not everybody is, this is my story. I was pretty willing right off the bat, but I certainly couldn't have been if I wasn't ready to surrender and give this program a shot. And I think what was always brought up to me was don't leave before the miracle happens.
Right. I think a lot of people get discouraged or find that the progress and growth comes slow, and they get frustrated and they start thinking this isn't working for me. And they start, going to less meetings, making less contact, and eventually they fall off the edge.
Yeah, because, we're always looking for that instant gratification, that immediate feeling of everything's better now.
And you know what? Time takes time. You hear that so often in
time
the program.
Takes time, yeah. And time, things I must experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I like
So
that.
There's lots of those good things in AA that help us remind ourselves that, as long as we're an inch by inch,
it's a cinch.
It's a cinch. Yeah, all those little things, little bits at a time. As long as we're making forward progress, we're doing okay.
Baby steps.
Baby beps.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what happens too often that we see, and I'm sure everybody that's been to any number of meetings has seen this, somebody comes in, they give the tires a kick, they go to a few meetings, and they say this isn't for me, or you just don't see them again. Right. And it's unfortunate because the program is there to work for you if you want it to. The thing you have to recognize is it is going to work for you, but you have to work.
Yeah, and we've spoken about that. You got to do the deal.
And, they say work it, you're worth it. It works if you work it, so work it, you're worth it. That's true. And I think some people just want it to come super easy, and it doesn't always happen like that.
Well, it was super easy to just pop the top and lose our,
Yeah. Super easy way to get over yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So now the real work starts, and it can be painful. It can be serious and frustrating and scary because we're doing things we've never done before. We're talking about things we've never talked about before.
Well, we've never seen this before. You walk into a room and people are acting in such a way that's completely unnormal. Unnormal?
Well,
is that a word?
Yeah, unfamiliar.
Unfamiliar to the world.
It actually
that they live
is
in.
normal, but to us it's unfamiliar.
Right. Yeah.
Being abnormal.
Yeah.
So the thing is, don't leave before the miracle happens, and sometimes that means sticking it out just one more day.
And you too can be a miracle.
That is one day at a time. So, all right, we got a great guest today. This is a guy that I'm very close to. His message just so resonates with me. He's been around the program for so long, and he's had successes and he's had failures. But one thing about him is he always speaks his truth, and he's a very good. He formulates those thoughts very well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So-
when he talks, he cuts deep sometimes.
Right on. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Mike.
Mike.
Mike, welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Why don't we start with your sobriety date?
My sobriety date. Let's see, what's today, Brett?
Oh,
I think 6 more days. I'll have a week, is what I'm kind of hoping
nice.
for. So it's pretty good. They told me it was a day at a time anyways.
That's right.
So even if my date was a week. Honestly and truly, the last date that I can give you in perpetuity would be December 2nd, 2013.
Okay, good. But this is not that wasn't your first meeting. Why don't we start at the beginning? You
wasn't?
tell us.
Oh, wait a minute. Mark's going to tell my story. I don't even need. That's the good thing about AA.
Yeah.
Once we stick around for a while, somebody can
Right.
tell our story for us.
Everybody else's story becomes a part of our story,
You know?
really.
In
doesn't
fact, my friend Dick, you know Dickie? Let's tell Dickie's story while we're here.
Oh, we'll have him on to tell his own story, but let's go back to the beginning. So, can we
beginning.
start with your first experience with the booze?
With the booze. Wow, you are taking me back.
Yeah.
And just in to set this up, I will answer your question, but I'm one of those people who's been around AA a really long time, like 39 years. I was thinking about this earlier. I have 39 years of AA meetings. It'd be nice if I could say I had the 39 years of sobriety. So my story obviously is not one that's going to be, without failure. But I think my first drink that I can remember was maybe 12 or 13, and hanging out with some guys. We got some Miller Ponies, if you were old enough to know what I mean, little glass bottles of beer that were 8 ounces each.
Were they like OV split?
They were
No,
short,
they were short.
short and fat. Yeah, they were like a little barrel. Yep, and they were Miller Ponies. Oh, yeah. And so somehow we had and they were 8-packs, Mark, if you remember that.
remember. I do remember those.
They were an 8-pack. They weren't even a 6.
We used to love getting those.
So
when I was
Miller
a kid.
Ponies, and we got them because some guy we kept asking people who were walking into the convenience store, hey, would you buy us beer? Hey, would you buy us beer? And the people left and right, no. Finally, the one dude was like, yeah. And he goes in, we give him a $10, whatever it was, and he hooks us up. So we went under the bridge. This is in Oswego where I was a kid. And underneath the big bridge that crosses over the Oswego River, we sat on the catwalk, the rusty catwalk, and drank beer. And that was my first buzz. And I remember at some point later on a bicycle falling over more than once. You'd get it straightened up and you pedal in, you'd fall to the left. And you'd laugh and you'd straighten it up and you'd fall to the right.
Did you like it though?
Oh, I thought it was hilarious. I had such a good time with my buddies, and the next day even waking up and being all bruised up one and both sides of my body and going, wow, So I actually had a good time.
Yeah. So you fell in love with it from the word go.
Something was different with that. I had a good time. I didn't like the taste. I don't know how many times I had to spit. I'm telling you, I would drink a sip and spit every other sip out when they weren't locking.
Because the taste was nasty.
It's horrible. I don't like it. But once it did settle in, it was an interesting experience. We've all been there, right?
Sure.
If we've gotten a buzz. So that was the first time I did that. And it was still in Oswego, and it ended up being the last day of school in 7th grade. So I would have been, 13 maybe. Last day of school, like a short, you go in, check in kind of thing, and then you're done. Somebody had some pot, and I'd never smoked pot. And we went and smoked pot for the first time. And I'll tell you, there's another experience because I got high. It was raining. I walked home in the rain like, wow, raindrops, like it was wild. And I get to my house, and my mother and my sister are home. And Mighty Mouse, if you remember Mighty Mouse, was on the television. And I'm watching the cartoon, and I'm losing it, laughing. And I just remember my mother going, what's wrong with him? Something's wrong. And I got sent to my room. And when my father came home, he came upstairs, and he grabbed me and looked at me, and he goes, oh, he's high. And he goes, don't do it again. And he walked out.
Problem solved.
Done. And I remember sitting there going, I'm definitely doing that again. So I loved that, too. And it's just funny, like drinking, and I immediately fell down, and there was a consequence. And I smoked pot and immediately got trouble. There was a consequence. So I've never really had. Usually, there's something happened. It's been my experience.
It's not been inconsequential.
Never.
So
That was fun.
So what happened going forward from there as a 13-year-old?
I will say that it didn't become an everyday thing with drinking for me for quite a while. I may have drank a few times, but I smoked a lot of pot as a kid, and this is the early 80s, and my family moved from where we lived in a little town called Pulaski, we lived in Oswego. We moved to this little town called Pulaski, out in the country. My mother thought it'd be a better environment for me to get into the country, get away from the city. Well, there was a lot of drugs in Pulaski, and I'm going to tell you that in 1980, which is the year I got out there, it was the very last year that Quaaludes were on the market. Now, I know this is a podcast around the idea of AA or recovery from alcohol, but my story includes this stuff.
And that's part of your story.
So there's Quaaludes on the market. And so there's a summer in 1980 that was next level for me. Marijuana, Quaaludes, LSD, mushrooms, and booze. And it all came hard when I was 14 years old.
So the floodgates opened.
Whew, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I was having a good time. I know there was consequences. I know there was some probation going on in my life there. I remember walking into a probation meeting, once a week ago, and sitting there with my probation officer. I don't remember her name. She had red hair. And her sitting there across the table, and I'm spewing it out. I'm doing really good. My classes are good. I'm telling her how
you
great.
Don't say.
Oh, it was fantastic. She's listening. And finally, she reaches down and puts my stash bag that I had hidden at home that my mother found that I didn't know.
Oh.
And she puts my stash bag on the table and goes, yeah, what about this? And I'm like,
truth hits everybody.
yeah, it had pot in it. It had scrapers. You know how you make your little collection of things, scrapers and lighters and bowls and
I am
baggies
getting an education today.
Paraphernalia. Yeah.
Okay.
I had and it was a little leather bag with a drawstring.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing that would ever anybody's attention would be drawn to walking down the street.
What is this leather drawstring bag? Full of spells and talismans. They really are our talismans. Aren't
geez, gosh, Mike. Oh, are you into leathercraft? Yes, yes. It's so I had problems, and I think it wasn't until I got to escalate this up a little bit, just in terms of my teenage years, but. My father passed away when he was 44 from a heart attack, unexpectedly. And my dad's relationship with me was not the closest, but I loved him. He was my dad. And it was a shock. And although I wasn't behaving necessarily well most of the time, he was still intimidating enough of a force in my life that I could only go so far, because if the old man got a hold of you, it was going to hurt.
So he was somewhat of a guardrail.
He was.
Yeah.
My dad definitely was. He never did drugs. He never drank. That was my dad. He smoked cigarettes, and that's what took him off the planet. But so he passed, and there was a period where I sort of took on that I'm the man of the family role.
Yeah.
And everybody said that to me. Mike, you're the man of the family, the man of the family. Okay. So I had quit school prior to this, decided I better go back. So I showed up at school, senior year. It would be my senior year.
First time since middle school?
No, really, yeah. Honest to God, right? And I never did the junior year because I'd quit. So I show up, and the principal never came out to talk to me. He saw me there. He told me, you need to sit. I'm busy first day. He waited till the entire day was gone, when everyone was gone, and then he popped his, oh, Mike, did you want to see me? Made me sit there. I went down.
So he was playing games with you.
He was testing me.
Yes, to see if you really had the desire to return.
I said, I need to come back to school. I doubled up my junior and senior year and passed every single class in 1 year.
Right. So
I could graduate with my class.
So like most of us, we're not stupid.
Oh.
We're just addicts.
That was one of the first
alcoholics.
things I realized was there is a great amount of intelligence in the rooms.
Yeah. Sometimes we're too smart for our own good.
Yeah.
It was never a problem of being smart. It was always a question of focus and attitude.
Yeah.
Same.
So but you did graduate.
I graduated with my class.
Okay.
So once graduation was over, though, it was kind of a different story. I remember my mom saying something to the effect of, well, what are you going to do? And my idea was to drink or get high and hang around the place. And she said, you have choices. You can join the Army. You can get a job. You can go to college. Or you can get the fuck out. but you're not going to just stay here
Right.
and lob around, do nothing. Well,
Right.
Army was not a plan I was interested in, although I did try that once for a minute and didn't work out. The college wasn't an option. I couldn't see myself ever, I didn't think enough of myself to think I could ever go to college. I was a BOCES kid, Send him to BOCES. He'll never
Yeah.
be college material.
He'll work with his hands.
Yes, right. So, and the idea of a job really wasn't that appealing either at that time.
Yeah, so get the fuck out seems like a pretty good option.
I built a lean-to.
My gosh, another outdoorsman.
I built a lean-to by the river in Pulaski, by the Salmon River.
Down by the river.
And I was eating out of gardens in the summertime and taking clothes off clotheslines and living kind of
Living the hobo life.
living that life and drinking when I could and partying.
But
And
at the time, were you thinking this is okay?
it didn't bother me until it started to get cold in November.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, where he's talking about, average about 130 to 150 inches of snow a year.
Absolutely. Multiples.
Bad time to be outside.
So you know what? There was a point there where my life was very unmanageable, and drinking was absolutely a part of it at that time. It had become more prevalent because of money. I didn't really have any money, so I wasn't doing a lot of drugs, but booze was everywhere. And I
More
think
accessible.
For sure. In the year that I quit and didn't go to school, I made connections with a lot of older guys who were bums and never did anything with their lives either. So I made a lot of friends. So my average buddy was 25 when I was 17. So these guys had IDs, they could buy booze, and that was the crowd I was. And they also had criminal records. And so I got in with a lot of guys, a couple of
that's
guys.
cool.
Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah, I was on the verge of committing some very serious felony crimes as a 17-year-old kid. We're talking putting stockings over and going in and going to rob people at a jewelry exchange, doing some really, really crazy stuff. And it was all, in my mind, somehow made some sort of sense because we needed money.
Right, so that high-risk behavior kind of goes with the territory.
I was already a hellion, but it was never dangerous. It was never harming other people, but things started to go in that direction potentially. I didn't think of it that way. I didn't see it that
We
way.
never
Right.
knew. Yeah.
But that's the way it was going. So I ended up getting arrested, myself and this other guy, John such and such. John had been to prison already, and we got busted for siphoning some gas, something people used to do. When you have no money and you could siphon $10 worth of gas, it gave you some freedom. But we were going to do that. We got caught, and he said, Mike this, Mike that, Mike this, Mike that. He dropped the dime on me.
So he threw you under the bus immediately.
Immediately, because he was facing some prison time again if he got in trouble. So I got arrested, and in the little town where I was, I'd been arrested enough times that even this charge, it was petty larceny, 90 days in jail.
Okay.
Petty larceny, stealing a candy bar.
Yeah, right.
That's what right now you'd get in a ticket. You wouldn't even go to court on it.
No.
But I went to jail for 90 days. And I will tell you, it's an interesting thing because that's where I went to my first AA meeting.
Tell us about that.
So I'm 19. I'm in jail for the second or third time. Everything I owned you could fit in a green garbage bag. I'm thinking this is not a bad deal because I'm getting food. I got along good. I was a trustee. Within 3 weeks, I'm a trustee. I'm making breakfast. I'm delivering food trays. Back then, things were a little different. The male staff in the office had a bunch of dirty magazines like Hustlers and things laying around in the office. So as the trustee cleaner, and I would go through to clean garbage, I swiped 3 or 4 of these magazines, threw them in my garbage bag, brought them back to the cell block, and I was wheeling
Hustling,
and dealing.
They are, right,
absolutely.
They're a hot item, right?
Wow.
I was wheeling and dealing pictures.
They are currency.
So you very quickly worked your way into being the king of the place.
I did
Tried
my
to.
version of it as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I found it comfortable. I was able to find my way in there. Like
How
a
did you
chameleon.
happen into your first AA meeting in jail, though? Like,
So,
how'd that happen?
Once a week, they would come around and say, AA, who wants to go? I had no idea what it was. Somebody said, hey, there's donuts or coffee or something. Hey, shit, I'm going to go. I had no idea. Well, there was no donuts or coffee. But I go downstairs. It was just men. And I think maybe 7, maybe 8 inmates went. And there were 3 gentlemen from the outside. And I'll never forget Dick, Barney, and Stan. I remember their names. And this is 1985 when this happened.
okay.
85. But Dick, Barney, and Stan. And I remember Stan being this shock of, these guys in AA, these old timers with the white hair, kind of like a Teddy.
Yeah.
Bill, Bob R. These
Very healthy head of hair.
Yes, the shock
But
of white hair.
Yes.
So here's this guy with a shock of white hair. But I remember his shirt had creases in it.
Wow.
And his pants were, to me that, I don't know, it got my attention. He just looked dapper. And
He looked together.
he reminded me of my grandfather, who I always was intimidated by but respected. So I looked at this guy, and he starts talking, and I'm thinking, this is interesting. And he said, is anybody in here because of something to do with booze? And I'm raising my hand. A bunch of guys did. It was a different kind of meeting, right? He goes, anybody here been here before? Yeah. Anybody ever been here? It had nothing to do with alcohol. You're just here because, and I couldn't raise my hand on that one because that was the first connection I ever made. When I drank, I got in trouble.
Bad things happen.
Every time. Or maybe not every time, but that's what would happen. So I started going to that AA meeting, and I kept going while I was in there.
What is it, once a week?
Once a week.
Yep. Okay.
The men's group, Lincoln County Jail, or Seward County Jail, Lincoln group, Tuesday nights. So I went, and by the time I got out, I kind of had enough sense of I probably need to just try to stop drinking. I don't want, I could see there was something. I didn't have this figured out, but there was something.
And you could have a better life.
I didn't know. I just know I didn't want to go back to jail.
Well, he had creases.
But so they opened your eyes.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. I wanted creases.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
And so you got out of jail. What happened after that?
I hitchhiked back home, literally. It was a winter's day. I got home, knocked on Mom's door, who didn't want me there, and said, I need someplace to stay. Well, you need to go back to work, whatever. So I get in, but I start going to AA.
Wow.
I start going to meetings. I didn't have a car out where I lived. I hitchhiked. I walked. I got to an AA meeting every day. And where I lived, there was no AA meeting in town every day. Monday was a Plasky meeting. Tuesday, you had to go to Mexico. Wednesday, you went to Sandy Creek. This is where they were. Nowhere else. Thursday, you went to Orwell, New York, Unity Acres. Friday, you went to Adams. And Saturday and Sunday was a Plasky.
Wow.
Where we live now, this misfortune that we have, we're thousands of meetings, right? So it was a little different back then. And, of course, they smoked cigarettes in the meeting rooms back then. It was a different world. But I went to those meetings. And you know what? I got there one way, and people gave me rides home. So I quickly, and I was young, by the way. To mention my age, I was 19.
Yeah, that's very young.
So people took me under their
wing.
wing.
Attraction if you're doing all that.
People were nice to me. I couldn't believe it. They were nice. Like the first meeting out of jail, I hitchhiked to. It was a snowy night. And I went to Plasky, and at the end of the meeting, somebody offered me a ride home, and I thought, this fucking guy's going to give me a ride home. He doesn't even know me.
Maybe they understand you?
Dude, but maybe. I didn't know, but I just got out of jail. And you're going to give me a ride home?
So this is kind of shocking to you.
Shocking.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people walk into their first meeting, and the thing that really blows them away is how open and friendly and how genuinely these people want to help you, and they don't even know you. And it's so foreign to us.
Bizarre.
The only other type of people that are ever nice like that, to comparison, I'm going to say this, no offense against everybody who's going to not like to hear it, are church people, but I never felt the same. With church people, it always felt awkward, forced, somehow that they were doing it to help this poor, when church people were nice and brought the boxes of food because we grew up kind of in poverty, it was a different thing. But these AA people, when they were nice, they were just nice. They didn't want anything. I didn't have anything anyways.
Yeah, you got nothing to take.
There's nothing to take, so they were nice. So it was a great thing. And, I'm a lucky guy because I got sober at a time when there were a lot of old-timers up in the area where I lived, a lot of 20, 30-year guys. And again, if we take this back to 1985, if you're an old timer in 85 with 30 years, that means you got sober in 55. You know who was still alive until the 70s?
Bill Wilson.
So these are guys that I went to meetings with that met these people.
Literally
that's crazy.
friends of Bill Wilson.
Yeah.
Friends of Bill.
Yeah.
I'm sitting with an old timer in Watertown, Emerson Laughlin, God bless his soul. He died 40 years. And we're talking one day. I'm sure it was a girl thing. Emerson, I got a girl. She hurt my feelings. And he's going, well, once Bill told me that. I go, Bill who? Bill Wilson. So anyways, and I'm just looking at him like it was like, Bill Wilson, right?
Yeah.
So to a kid like me, that meant something. And I've had that experience where I have met and been able to be around some people that had some really, really amazing long-term sobriety. And we still have that. But that was what impacted me early on, was people were nice to me. And I bought into this. I'm going to be honest with you. I said at the beginning, 39 years of AA meetings. And if you did the math, I have a little over 10 years without a drink. But I ended up staying sober my whole 20s. from 19 to 31.
Man, that's impressive.
So you buy in, you get a sponsor.
Yeah, I did get one, and
Okay.
the sad story is my first sponsor committed suicide.
So you
Sober.
was-
7 years
Yeah.
without a drink.
Yeah, it
he took his
happens.
life. The depression.
And you start working the steps.
I'm going to not say yes. I'm going to say I went to meetings. I did the sponsor. I was reading the big book. I got involved in service, making coffee. I was a GSR. I went to area meetings. I got as involved as you could get, but that step stuff, I kind of just, it was there. I read through them. I'm going to say this. Back then, I don't remember anybody saying, we got to take you through the steps. It wasn't something I ever heard. I don't remember people talking that. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right, but it's not what I remember
It wasn't your experience
at all.
So what happened 13 years in?
So I stay sober. I go through this, and obviously from 19 to 31, life changes. There's relationships, jobs, and all that. Even some college in there for me, and believe it or not, right? And then I started having some back trouble. Legitimate back trouble. I ruptured a disc, herniated a disc, and I started having a lot of problems with it. And I did physical therapy. I had TENS unit. I did cortisone. I did all of those things for a long time. Still had problems. And I don't know what the day was or the scenario, but I remember the name Lortab. The doctor said, I'm going to give you a Lortab, which is one of those other names for a hydrocodone. Okay, I'm going to take a Lortab then. Doctor says take it. Well, guess what? Lortabs make you feel better, don't they? If you've ever taken one.
Not only that, but they have a euphoric side effect.
Oh, certainly do.
Yes.
And because the doctor gave them to you, it didn't strike me as wrong. Now, I will give you some more information about my life at that time. I had spent some time working in the helping professions as a counselor in a psych center, and I'd gotten hired as a group home supervisor for a boys' group home. I ran a group home for 4 years. Nonprofit place for juvenile delinquent boys. Perfect job for a guy like me, And when I was sober and working my program, it was good. I didn't make any money, but it was a good place for me, and I did some good things. But once the pills came in and took over, it changed me.
Yeah.
And I know this is hard to believe for anyone that doesn't actually know me, but I can be a little bit much.
No,
And
come on.
I was a little bit of a tyrant. And one day I went into work, and the doctor or the bosses, they basically called me in and said, listen, we received a letter from your staff, and basically they're all saying if we don't fire you, they're all going to quit.
Oh, boy.
Because I had created a hostile work environment was the way they phrased it. And they fired me. So my ego took a huge crash.
How long into the use of these
6 months.
opiates? So it took
Six
6 months for you to go through this
6
change,
months.
this Jekyll and Hyde change, where it became unmanageable very quickly.
6 months.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it. For me to become somebody that
You weren't
couldn't do.
drinking though, right?
Right.
It was just the drugs.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing or another.
So here's how this all played out. They fired me. Poor me. I go to my buddy who I'd been with for years that we were in and out of recovery together, my friend whose name I won't mention, but he's gone now. And I was talking to him about it, and I said something about being sober. And he goes, Mikey, you're not sober. I go, yeah, I might have had a drink in 11. He goes, bullshit. You're a junkie. You're hooked on pills. And I remember going, you know what? You're right. And I cracked a beer that day.
It went right for it.
Fuck it. You got
I
a case
cracked
of the
a beer
fuck it.
that
Again.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fuck it strike again.
Now that's 19, whatever it was.
You
And
showed him.
I sure did, damn it. The next 17 years of my life were completely chaotic. Periods of sobriety, recovery, marriages, good job opportunities, 6-figure salaries, new cars. I used to work. I was a gym rat for a long time. I was in great shape. And, then I would get that idea that it might be a good idea to take a couple of pills. My drug use had escalated into heroin at some point.
Now, was life getting lifey at any point during that?
Well, it was created by me. The
Oh.
the lifiness, Brett, it's a good question. It was created by me. God, I'll say it this way. Opportunities were put in my life, things, people, situations that were great. And I have this uncanny ability to, like Dickie talks about, screw myself out of everything. So I had the brass ring. I had the sobriety more than once, the beautiful wife, and I did. I had been married twice, and they were both, quality people. I had the sobriety, the relationship situations, the jobs. But one part of Mike was always, there's got to be a way for me to get high a little bit, just to take the edge off. I don't have to do it every, this debate. I did not struggle with alcohol the way I struggled with the drugs with the debate, but every time I lost the struggle, the alcohol came right back into it. So these things are interwoven like a DNA strand.
It's the most accessible thing, too. You can
It was
just go right
crazy.
to the store and get that.
Yeah, it was crazy stuff. So, I went through that, and that 17 years was
Sounds
painful.
like torture.
It was
So the
painful.
whole thing is just unmanageable, right?
More than unmanageable.
Are you in denial at this point?
Somehow I'm going to fix it. Somehow
Yeah.
there's going to be a way for me to pull out of it.
So
I
there's
went
an
to
issue.
meetings.
Yeah.
What else did you try?
I never stopped. What do you mean, drugs?
No, what else did you try to try and fix it? You were saying, I can
I
get out
did.
of this.
I
What
did
types of things?
counseling. When I mentioned the ideas that I did exercise and stuff like that, I got really heavy into that. But one of the other things that came into it at some point was there are medications out there that they give to alcoholics and drug addicts, and I won't get on that rant. But I was on one of those medications to ease you off of the drugs.
So you're talking harm reduction.
Yeah, and I don't even remember if they were using that phrase then.
Yeah.
I was into it a little bit before all that. But I learned to abuse that too. I learned to play that game. So I learned early on that wasn't an answer for me. I still would do it because I didn't want to face withdrawals, but I knew that the only way to get through this was to do what I had done the first 11 years of my
Abstinence.
life. Yes.
Yes.
To get sober.
The AA was still stuck in there, huh?
Oh, geez Louise.
In that brain.
My friends in AA, and I'm going to say it this way, my true friends in AA are still my friends. And during those years, I would come to meetings in various states of inebriation. I would show up to meetings high. I've even used in a bathroom in an AA meeting. I couldn't even get through the meeting without getting high. So people can be shocked by that and think I'm terrible. And in fact, I've heard people say stuff like that about it when they heard my story. Oh, my God, how disrespectful. Yeah. It's a disrespectful disease, let me tell you. It'll make you say and do things that you don't want to do. So I was very powerless, and it took an awful lot to beat that out of me. And I'm just glad that I didn't die along the way. But I hurt a lot of people. I did a lot of damage. And the last time this happened to me, after the second marriage and all that stuff went through, things didn't come back to me quickly. I went to a doctor. I asked for some help. He got me on some other medication, but he had a plan. You're going to do this. This doctor was hardcore. Mm-hmm. I never met anybody like this.
So he knew about your addiction.
He knew about addicts.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to listen to. He didn't even want to take me as a patient. He listened to me for 10 minutes. He goes, I don't even want to work with you.
Because they know we're hopeless.
He knew I knew everything. I'm too cocky. And the guy just saw everything that there was to see. And he called me on the carpet. He goes, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm skeptical. You're going to have to go to meetings. I want to see a meeting list. I want to know the topic. You write it down. You're going to take this medication. You're going to bring in the empty wrappers. I'm going to check your blood. If there's any more or less medication than I'm telling you to take, you're off the program. You're going to counseling, not individual. You're not going to manipulate an individual counselor. You're going to group. This guy wailed on me.
So, but this guy had a lot of experience.
He was something
And
else.
I just
So
wonder
he
if
knew.
he had experience. Because I think my doctor
He didn't.
has experience.
He didn't.
No.
No,
Okay.
and I wish I'd like to almost mention his name. He's retired now, but the guy saved my ass. He was one of those people that got put in my path. Any lesser of a doctor, anybody, oh, Mike, you're going to be okay. Anybody that was more like that, I would have lied to them and abused the situation and blown myself out. So this guy called me out, and I did it. I was so desperate. I was so desperate that time to do what I was told. And I actually did. And I got clean. And I got off the pills and the drugs. And I had never quit AA. So I still had my people. I didn't have much of a program, obviously. But I had my relationships and my people to fall back on. And the ones that stuck by me are still my friends. And there's a few of them around that were complete assholes to me back then. And they're still around. And I'm nice to them, but I don't forget, When somebody's down in this program, our job is to pull them up. The only time we're supposed to look down on other people is when we reach down to help them up. We're not supposed to trash people who are struggling with the same thing we struggled with just because they aren't getting it as quick as we did.
That's 100% true.
I'm big on that. You can't get, because you never know when somebody's going to get it. You never know. It could be tomorrow.
Yep.
There's people that we look at going, he's going to die, and we were right. They died.
Yeah.
And other people you go, he's going to die, and you know what? Mark DB, one of our buddies, who was on here a few weeks ago, I met him at Tully. The first time I met him, I said, you're never going to make it with that giant ego. It pissed him off. He's still sober, and he reminds me of that, because you told me I wasn't going to make it. I never forgot that. I'm like,
well, I'll tell you.
I'm glad I was wrong.
I remember when you told me I was full of shit. Because I was having a hard time with a 4-step, kept bringing it up just like everybody else. And you look square in my face. And he says, you know what? You're full of shit. And how do I know? Because I'm full of shit too. And it was just like, God. But I'll tell you, some people will run away from that.
Well, they do. I have had to. And, I remember that conversation. I've never been somebody shy about saying what I think. And I'm not always right. Yeah. But I would rather piss you off and hurt your feelings than watch you die. So if I need to say something to get your attention,
it's just enough to shake us.
It's just me.
Yeah.
That's just the way I am.
That is what they refer to as old school AA.
Right.
I'm better. I'm less harsh.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, we all change with the times. But so you
I got sober again.
Yeah.
This last time, and when I said things didn't come back as quick, they didn't come back. So let's talk about God for a minute, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Something that I've struggled with. Something came to me that never came before, which was it didn't come back. I didn't get a good job. I went to work at Firestone. It sucked. I made $40,000 a year before taxes. It was a terrible schedule. I hated my life. I smelled like grease. The relationship I had was horrible. I was driving a shitty car. I had a heart attack my first year in sobriety. It was like I had tickets up the wazoo. I had no money. And if I was going to quit, I guess I could have had a lot of excuses to quit and say this is just no good because it didn't all come back. But I've hung in there, and things have all come around. It took a while, and I think that was God in his way saying, you're going to have to work harder this time. I'm not just going to, like the pink clouds or whatever.
Or it's not going to be given. We were just talking about this earlier. We were talking about don't leave before the miracle happens. Because what happened to you can be very discouraging and make a lot of people say, you know what, my life sucks even worse now that I'm not drinking.
You've heard
so
that.
Fuck it.
We hear that people say that in
meetings.
meetings.
We do. We really do. So
I'm lucky.
If you keep coming back and you stick around until the miracle happens, it will happen.
I'm going to say that because the fellowship is open and there aren't no restrictions, there aren't any restrictions on who can be there and whatever. It's made all the difference in the world. I've had to talk about drug use a little bit. I don't do it so much anymore. I'm sharing it in my story. But I've had to talk about that because that demon affected my thinking a little differently, and it was a lot more insidious for me. It's funny, though, alcohol just waited patiently for me to let my guard down with the drugs, and the booze was right there. So it's never changed. I've probably been an alcoholic from day one. And maybe I didn't drink as much as some people, but I drank enough for me. Yeah. The last time around, though, it took a while.
So you go to this doctor and you get on a straight and narrow and you get sober.
I come to meetings.
Did you stay sober?
Since this time? This is an interesting question.
No, I mean, so you go to this doctor,
yeah,
right? And he kind of gets you on a straight and narrow.
He gets me on a straight and narrow. I was on this medication. So there's people that question whether or not you're sobriety if you're on these medications. And I didn't want to stay on it, but I felt for a period of time that I needed it to help me. So I was on this medication for 5 months and finally tapered off of it completely. So depends on where you stand. Some people say you're not sober because you were taking that medication. I was going to meetings. I didn't drink and do any other drugs. I tapered off it and got off it. I say I was sober, but I could argue it even with myself. Do I want to start my sobriety date from the 5 months in? I guess it has to do with your head. Where was my head at? And my head was in the right place.
Okay.
I was trying to make a change. So that's what's happened in the last 10 and a half years. And I have actually had a really good 10 and a half years. I mean, I'm really lucky. I did have a heart attack. But in terms of the overall, I've made a lot of new friends. Mm-hmm. I've kept some of the old ones. I got married last September. That's a recent happening. But in the last 10 years, I've had some different relationships. I've come out of each one with more knowledge about me than I had the time before. I've done step work in this last 10 years like I never did before, but I'm still not somebody I would consider really versed in the steps the way I would say Mark is taking a lot of people through, and I know you're doing that. I'm not, if I've sponsored people, that's never been where I think I shine as a sponsor. I'm more about we can talk. I want them to be honest, try to see themselves, get to meetings, meet people, get involved in the fellowship, do service work, read some book, but I'm not the one that's going to, like, if you want to tell me something, like your fifth step, I'll listen to it, but the guy that goes through in step 1 and 2, and I guess that's my own area of growth still. Even now, after all these years, I still have that area that I could do better with, but I feel very positive and comfortable with my first step, that I understand my powerlessness. The unmanageability was clearly running my life. Something greater than me came in 2 forms, AA and then God, as I'm understanding him now. Getting back to a Christian kind of way of thinking in my life because of my wife, really. Taking my own inventory, which is easy because other people help me with that all the time. And some of the things that have happened in my life that have really made this part of my life amazing. For example, I got involved with you and other guys, but we started a band. I've always wanted to be and do something out there, right? And I always thought I sung decent, and I wanted to do that, but didn't have an instrument. Tried to teach myself how to play guitar. Still hasn't worked out all that well, but we have a band, and we have a successful band that plays locally. We make a little bit of money for fun, but 4 of the 5 guys are in recovery. AA brings gifts on many levels to allow me to live a life that makes this worthwhile. So whether it's the band or relationships, a lot of good stuff.
Well, that band helped me realize I could still have fun.
Yeah.
That's no joke.
Yeah, when we play out, we get a lot of people, a lot of AA people come out, and it's awesome. And no one drinks, and we all have a great time without alcohol and without drugs. And there's something to be said for that. I think a lot of people probably thought once I get sober, boy, fun's over.
Done.
There's nowhere to go, nothing to do. And we've had guests on that have talked about how much fun they're having now that they're not drinking.
Yes.
And how they do pretty much the same stuff, just without the booze. Like
Absolutely.
fishing, motorcycles, sports, music,
Sex.
You have sex with me no matter what.
Yeah.
But anyway, so getting back to you and your story, so
Sex.
I want to get back to this. Anyway.
okay. So talk to us a little bit about your experience with step 2 and 3. You mentioned a little bit about it, but
So power greater than myself, restoring me to sanity. Going through my life, there was always a exposure to Catholicism and some born again Christian kind of stuff for a few years. And I chased around a few things. I hung out with some Mormons. I spent some time in a monastery when I was in my 20s for almost 2 weeks. I've tried to find God.
you're a seeker.
I have been, yeah. And you know what? I didn't do too good with it. I'm ADD. It doesn't happen fast enough. It doesn't happen when and how I want it to. So I look for other things. And, alcohol and drugs were always a quick, easy resource. But my trip has gone to this place that I realize at some point what I'm going to find is going to have to come from here. I got to slow down a little bit. I'm not going to find it the way you found it, probably, or you or someone else. It's not in a building. It's not in a church, because I've gone to lots of churches and I haven't found it there. It doesn't mean God doesn't dwell there, but he doesn't mean he doesn't dwell right here in this room too. So me finding him is more about where I am in that. And I have to be open, When my ego and my pride run the show, I can't believe in a power greater than me, because I am the power.
There you go.
And I have to get past that. And I know it intellectually, but it's a strong, the drive to want to run your own life.
Well, we're human. Yeah.
It's a tough one. So I believe that God has come into my life. I believe that really with the marriage that I have. God gave me another opportunity to be married a 3rd time. I don't want to screw this one up. I don't want to hurt that girl. I don't want to hurt me. So I have a lot riding on this idea that if I'm going to turn my life over now and try to do it differently this time, and I am trying, I have to continue to believe that stuff. It's hard sometimes. You have bad days. situations with work, financial, physical.
And you
health.
know what's funny about that? Like you say, sometimes it's hard to do that. It's hard to keep the belief.
It is.
Other times you say, how can I not believe this when this just happened? Or
Yeah.
this opportunity was put in my path? How could I ever doubt this?
Especially the longer we're in it, the more we see those things that we just don't see at that moment, but they pop up all the time. If you look back at your progression through this program,
Right, but
they're all over the
that
place.
self-doubt.
When do you see
Becomes
your
a
higher
God
power? Like if I ask you right now, when does the evidence of your higher power jump out at you and you go, that is my higher power?
You know, many, many times it's dealing with people in AA and trying to help people, especially when trying to help people, or watching other people help other people. But other things, you know, like internally, I'll get into a situation where I start, I can feel myself coming on and I can't get out of my own way. So my ego is up front.
Do you pray?
You know, oftentimes when I realize what's going on, that my ego is starting to run the show, I'm like, please, God, don't help me. Don't let me do this.
Yeah.
And what'll happen eventually is my higher power will somehow let me know, shut your mouth, get out of your own way, let me handle it, just go into the situation expecting nothing, and it's going to work out for you. And basically saying, can you give me that much faith?
So there's the question. And let me ask Brett, because you guys are the interviewers here, but I'm interviewing you for a second. When does God show up in your life? When do you see this?
In the way that I go through life now, whenever something, you know, there's been 3 significant things for me this year, over this past year, that have come up. Mom going in a nursing home, my daughter having some incontinence issues, stepson having, playing the 2 parents together. You know, a lot of hard stuff to deal with that any fraction of one of those would have taken me out. But now I have a framework and I have a belief that life will be okay as long as I just let life be okay.
As long as you turn it over.
Yeah, as long as I'm not
Yeah.
trying to control it. It happens in the rooms, like you said, with helping people. It happens out of the rooms when my wife is struggling with something, and I can give her that assurance that if you just sit back and trust, that things can be okay, right? And we don't have to try and control everything. So I would say it's quite regularly for me.
This is what, and I'm asking this question because this is probably my struggle with this. I believe, but when I'm in the heat of the battle, the first thought sometimes is, I got to figure this out myself.
Right.
It's only afterwards, or once I realize it's getting out of hand, that I'll go, hey, God, I need help. I'd love to be able to bridge that gap and have that be my first.
You know something, I always say that it's never my go-to.
It's never my go-to.
I learn at the speed of pain. So I will take the reins until it becomes so apparently painful that I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing it to myself again. It's alcoholic thinking.
I don't know what that is. Do we don't think we deserve it, or is it a lack of trust?
I just
in
think
the
it's
God?
the way it's never mine. Okay, I've been sober for over 30 years.
Yeah.
Mine has never gone away, never, and it's my higher power is never my first go-to. You know,
See, for
you'd
me-
think.
I will give this guy credit for something. He said something in a meeting. I give him credit for more than one, but I can't give him all at once.
Just
His
careful.
ego.
This room's small.
Go on.
The one that he
There
talked
it is.
about was his higher power only lives in the present moment. And it doesn't mean it doesn't exist otherwise, but the sense of it is my higher power is here in this moment. I can't pray to my higher power tomorrow. I can't ask for his help yesterday. It's in the here and now that if I can step back and recognize I can draw that power right now. It's not something that when I get to that, once I achieve that step, once I complete that, no, it's right now. If you tap in, he's or it or she is here. To believe that, I think that's where that.
And here's the
That's
thing.
the thing. Believe in that. But that's
Here's-
something from him that
It's
I always.
always here in the now, and it's always available. It's up to me. And I think this is what they mean when they say God gave us free will. I have the free will to choose to recognize the reality of that or to remain stuck in my own head and try to do it my way.
Yeah.
And you know what? If I stay in my head and I try to do it my way enough, it's a fucking beatdown.
It's a
beatdown.
There's my
Inevitably.
story. So all the stuff that I shared, which is a chaotic mess. I mean, come on, let's go, and think about what I just talked about. Up and down and in and out and back and forth. And in there was Mike.
Fighting with the world.
And I believed in AA. AA is a power greater than me, but it's not enough. As much as I believed in AA, as immersed as I was, and I have been in AA for a long time, it wasn't enough
That's why we have
unto
step
itself.
11.
It's that next step to a higher power, buddy. Right. It's that next, and then believing in it. That old guy that I talked about with the creases in his shirt, Stan, was a very strong believer, in his God. And for a lot of years when he would talk about it, he would talk, and, I'm shaking my head up and down as he's talking, but inside I'm going, yeah, well, that's fucking nice. But
It's not
I
me.
don't really believe that. But you know what it was? I'd look at him, and I'd listen to him, and I'd look in his eyes. He believed it. Mm-hmm. He really did. And because he believed it so much, it helped me. It didn't make me believe his stuff, but I loved him, and he loved me. So just that fellowship connection meant something to me more than just a guy in AA.
But how we recoil when we come up with somebody like that, right? So if somebody were to come to me and start talking about religion, I'd be like, whoa!
Yeah.
But yet, we notice they don't have drama in their lives.
Yeah.
And they're happy.
Well, I'm saying his belief, not the religion piece, but it's the same thing you're saying, Brett, that he believed in a higher power. And it was always framed in AA. He never framed it religiously. It was always framed in AA.
Smart.
And he never pushed it.
Yeah.
He would never tell me what to do. Never.
Attraction.
Never. He would just sit there.
He would just say, "This is what I'm doing," and you see it working.
Or if I said, "What do you think?" He'd look at me and he'd go, "Okay, I'll tell you." But
Right.
he wouldn't sit there and volunteer any of that, So I'm a blessed guy in that I've reached this place where there is, in that step to a power greater than me. I truly do believe it. I got to access it more. I pray every day. I pray with my wife. I go to church on Sundays, which is a new thing. And I've gone from doing it just because I told her I would do it to some days looking forward to going, other days not. But this new version of me, I sit there sometimes. I go, you know what, Mike? This is good for you.
Yeah, it's working for you.
This is good for you to be here. This is good for you to do what you're doing. So I'm a happier person than ever. And I think just lately, this last year, I've had a couple challenges with my health. And it was only a year ago that I went through a crazy kind of situation with a relationship that really took my knees out from underneath me and reduced me to a point where I felt very, very helpless and hopeless. I didn't pick a drink up, but it brought me to a place where my relationship with God had to start working for me differently because I wasn't going to get through it. And Mark helped me a lot. I'll give you that one. And Bobby, who was on here, helped my ass last year, and so did Jeremy, and so did Mark D. And there's a lot of guys in AA that listened to me. I was in a dark place in recovery a year or so ago. I was in bad friggin' shape. We had a show we were going to play music one night, and I was crying. I couldn't stop crying. I was just body-racking sobs. I felt so bad. And I called Mark an hour or so before the show, and I said, Mark, I can't do it. I cannot do this show. And he talked me off the ledge. I don't know what he said. Same thing everybody says. Get your head out of your ass. You're going to be okay. But, there's an amazing, amazing wealth of love and caring for the people that we're around. So it may start with the desperation of I need help to stop drinking, but I need help now to stay stopped. I need that help. I continue to need it. Right. So God gives me you guys, and my job is to keep trying to access that. So, yeah, I'm lucky.
Yeah. Well, we're all lucky to remain sober. And we've reached the end of our time, Mike, but it's been fascinating, and it's a great conversation we've had.
All night long.
We really appreciate it. And for those out there in
we're not a glum lot.
We are not a glum lot.
We haven't said that, right?
We're not a glum lot.
And tell me, where else in the world do we use the word glum?
I don't know.
Let's come up with one for your guys' podcast.
You know what? Let's end the episode. I'm Mark.
I'm Brett.
I'm Mike.
As we wrap up another episode of the Glum Lot Podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Navigating the path to recovery from alcohol and other substances is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery.
Remember, we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous, but we're here to provide a safe space for open conversations about the complexities of recovery. Your stories, courage, and resilience inspire us and our listeners alike. If you or someone you know is on the transformative journey, know that you're not alone. Join us next time as we continue to explore the diverse facets of recovery. Until then, stay strong, stay connected, and remember that each day is a step towards a brighter, sober tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Glum Lot community.